allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we have some guests in the room, so why don't we do a quick go around so that we can say who we are on the committee, kind of what our role is in the school district, so that our guests who are presenting tonight can know who they're presenting to. So they all know me. I'm Keith Howell, I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Valarie St. John, Board Trustee.
Sara Belvedere, parent and consultant at Uncle Mine's D for English and Continuous Improvement.
Christine Harris, parent, students who graduated, and I taught in the district for 20 years. Yeah, retired, now I'm a babysitter.
Marianne Modlin, also parent. My son's graduated from North. I graduated from South. I'm also a teacher, retired teacher, so I taught it mainly at South, and then my last 4 years divided between North and South, but now retired and then a member of the curriculum committee.
Terry Collins, Board Trustee, and I apologize, I will be leaving at, there's another meeting, we're double booked, the Finance and Facilities is at 6:30, excuse me, so I'm gonna be here, I'll be here at least till Lisa's here, but hopefully for another 25 minutes. I hopefully get to hear some of it, at least 2 presentations, we'll see.
I think we'll get real close to getting through them. So, all right, thanks for that. Just go over the agenda real quickly. We have an ELA presentation today. We have a communications ELA presentation today, elementary program and studies update, and then also we have a grading conversation, and then we're going to take you through some of the narrowing focus activity that we recently did. I'll show you the results of the 7 people that took that survey from our group, and then we'll just have some closing remarks, and we'll hopefully be able to enjoy the rest of the nice weather outside. So
Sure.
We need a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, everyone approves the agenda. That moves us to the third item, which is for information discussion. As you know, I've been bringing you some updates over the last year in regards to some of the ELA work we were doing. 2 areas of the ELA that we've really focused on this year at the elementary level is specifically our assessment calendar and some of the work that we do with assessing students. So Gigi Murray and Julie Burke are here to present today our presentation on the ELA updates. Without further ado, come on up. All right, so whenever we start a presentation, we like to share kind of our why and our process. And I know I've shared this with all of you many other occasions. So the ELA committee, whoops. Oh, I don't have the right one up.
No, that's last year's.
That is what she said.
Is it this one? 2024? Yeah.
Yes. All right, there we go. That's the right one. All right, so we always connect things back to our strategic plan whenever we're meeting as a committee. We want to make sure that we're cultivating our educational excellence by empowering students, valuing diversity, inspiring curiosity, and pushing possibilities. When we take a look at these bullets, these are the bullets that really drive our focus when we're sitting down as a committee and reviewing what we do as a school district and how we want to continue to push forward to make it better. Our goal in EPLC, that's the Education Programs Leadership Council, this presentation went through them. It was voted on and went through them unanimously. We always want to cultivate a robust, equitable educational community. We want our students to receive a rigorous and relevant curriculum that's aligned pre-K through graduation. Our phases of review. We always have phase 1, which is when we develop our curriculum and we take a look at our ideas, what we're currently doing, and compare that to our standards and benchmarks. Then we move on to constructing our curriculum, then we implement. As you know, we were already in a review cycle, it was already completed. So this is actually a maintenance phase We always want to meet on a regular basis to review to see what we're doing. We don't want to wait 6 years in between a review cycle. We want to make sure we're meeting every year, and if there's adjustments that need to happen, we will make those adjustments. And that's why we're in this maintenance phase, to evaluate our assessment protocol based off of the really great reading program that we implemented last year, and also some of the best practices around the science of reading. So we were in a maintenance phase, and that's what brought us to this group today. Do you want to go over Julie, the committee members, and then we can go from there?
Sure, so this is a continuation of last year's presentation where we requested approval for adoption of Really Great Reading as a foundational skills and phonics program. This committee has now expanded to continue the work into next year, but after implementation and initial implementation of a foundational skills and phonics program, we had some questions from the committee regarding our assessment practices and whether our historic assessment practices aligned with the work of the classroom teachers and aligned with best practices related to reading and updates and things that we know now about what helps our youngest learners read. And so we decided to continue our work. This was our team. We had representation from young 5th through 5th grade. Every building is represented. We had our literacy coaches, Gigi's on there as a literacy coach, and of course special ed and a parent representative as well.
So I'm Gigi Murray. I'm a reading teacher and a literacy specialist. As Julian P. said, I was on the committee and continue to work with the committee. So we just kind of want to introduce what the multi-tiered system approach is. As he said, it's research-based and best practices for instruction and assessment. So we want to make sure everyone's getting what they need, which might be different levels of intensity. So when we look at this is tier 1. So every child is getting tier 1 instruction across the board. And then what happened is, if we look at what they need, we add a little bit more. So some students are going to need tier 2, which is a targeted intervention. So understanding why they're maybe not understanding what they didn't get. So we're going to give them some target. And then fewer students are going to need an intense intervention, which is tier 3 students. So looking at this visual, you can see that everyone continues to get tier 1 instruction. Then some students will get tier 2, and then some students will get tier 3. And again, it's not necessarily the same lesson over and over. We're changing it to see why they didn't understand it. We're giving them the same content, but in a different way and more intensity. So what is MTSS? We want to kind of look at what it is within Grosse Pointe. So it's a systematic approach to support all students. So it's data-driven decision-making for interventions. It's tiered level of support for diverse student needs. So I was just showing you that tiered level to making sure that each student is getting what they need. It's early identification and prevention of difficulties. It's collaborating efforts among educators and staff. So we come together and we really look at what this child needs and how we can reach them. A team of people coming together and figuring out what we can do to support those children. And then it's a flexible and adaptive to changing student needs. So once we give that child that tier 2 intervention, if it's working, then we can say this worked. Let's watch them and monitor them. If it's not working, we're going to say, what else can we do? Let's give them another type of intervention. Let's monitor them. Let's watch what they're doing to see how we can support them. So we're constantly looking at that data. We're looking at the support we're giving them. We're identifying what they need, all based on the data and what we're presenting them. So what is MTSS? It's collaborative problem solving. It's an assessment system, and it's those tiers of instruction. But ultimately, it's really about our kids. It's what we can do to target that support for the students. So the data that we collect and we look at in front of us, it's those faces. So we're looking at those students and we're thinking, how can we support them? It's not just numbers. We're looking at those kids, we're looking at those faces, we're seeing how we can support them best and we can give them that positive impact for their future. So there's 4 different types of assessment. There's screening, there's diagnostic, there's progress monitoring, and then there's an outcome. So under the MTSS, we kind of looked at all of these and what we're using in Grosse Pointe, and that team that we were talking about, the curriculum committee, we went through each thing that we're already using, and we were looking at where they fell, what the outcome was, what we were using it for, and if it was providing us with the data that we needed to help support these kids in this tier system. So that's what kind of brought us further to the next one. So these are some of the ones that we are currently using. We use our NWA map growth. We use MSTEP in the older grades, end of unit assessments and like our MESA units and things like that. Our font test and Pinnell, which you might hear of FNP, which is a benchmark assessment system. We use our Grosse Pointe writing, and then this year we used our really great reading. This is beginning of the year program, middle of the year program, and end of the year program. And then we kind of threw out there, are there other things people are using and where would they fall? So we looked at each one of these and we talked about how are we using it, what are we using it for, and is it really a valid outcome? Is it showing us what we need to use? Is it using that research base and all those things? And we use it as a committee, and everybody on the committee, which Julie showed you, those people across grade level, special ed, kindergarten, young fives, all the way up to 5th grade. It was wonderful to see, and we kind of broke out and we talked about each assessment. And that kind of brought us to where we are.
And that led to kind of our driving question, which is what systems, structures, and resources can we put in place to ensure positive future outcomes for students? So we were really excited by the implementation of our phonics program, and we were excited about the growth that we were already seeing in our students. And our teachers were saying to us, but now what do we do? So this is catching up and picking up many students through just this tier 1, this curriculum adoption. But how do I know when I want to pull a group of 4 or 5 kids back to my table in the elementary classroom, how do I know what to do with them? And how can I be sure that what I select is appropriate for them and is what they truly need so that we can close gaps and we can increase outcomes for kids in regards to reading? So that was our driving question, and we really leaned into what is an MTSS framework. We had to do a lot of learning around that first so we could understand, like, what are we trying to build here? What do we want to ask for? And so, this is what we decided to develop. So this is a differentiated approach to assessment. Historically, Grosse Pointe teachers would administer the NWEA MAPS growth assessment 3 times a year, and we will still do that. That's going to be our kind of initial or universal screener there for students. But then we would administer the F&P 2 times a year only, maybe a 3rd time for students that we might want to check in on. But it wasn't a requirement 3 times, it was 2 times a year. And so to use that data for instruction is really impossible because you've done the F&P assessment in September and now it's November or December and you're wondering how a student's progressing or they're not keeping up through the tier 1 instruction and the classroom assessments that you're providing. What can I do for this 2nd grader to know how to help them decode words or help them read? So it's kind of hard to see on the screen. I know you should have access to this to look deeper, but what we determined as a committee is that we really needed a different approach for our K2 and our 3-5 students. We're anticipating that through our phonics program, our 3-5 students are going to have some of those gaps that we maybe historically saw regarding decoding and would be filled in. So our K2 students, everyone's going to take the NWEA assessment, but then anyone who scores below the 40th percentile, we need to drill down and do a deeper look at. And we need to do a deeper look beyond just, are they a level A, B, C, or D? We need to be able to decide, what is it? Is it phonological awareness? Is it letter sound ID? Is it a decoding deficit? What is it? So that our teachers can work with those students in really targeted skill-based groups. And this is going to help the teachers do that. So let's say you have a 1st grader who scored below the 40th percentile on the NWEA. If that's true, the teacher would also look at the beginning of program or depending on the time of year, middle of program for our foundational skills. That is not asking teachers to do anything additional. Those are 2 assessments they already have to do. So they're going to take those 2 pieces of data, they're going to take a look at that and see where are some gaps and how can I drill down. So if if they see that there's some, if they're below that 50th percentile then, they're going to drill down in here, and based on what it tells us, we can drill down into phonological awareness, letter sound ID, or word level automaticity. And it gives teachers suggestions for what kind of interventions that they would provide the student in the classroom. Our reading coaches and our literacy coaches will still work with our most at-risk students who would score like below the 30th percentile, but these are for those kids, like sometimes you'll hear teachers say like the bubble kids or things like that where you're just not sure, they're not keeping up, and you don't want them to fall farther behind, and early intervention is key, so this is going to help us do that. Then in our third through fifth grade students, you'll notice that it doesn't break it down into phonological awareness, letter sound ID. We're hoping that they're gonna have that for us, right? And so we're gonna start with that NWEA. We're gonna go into a oral reading fluency. So that 1 minute timing is a really good predictor of reading success. So our third through fifth grade students, if they are below the 40th percentile on NWEA, we're going to do that. We're going to look at the percent of accuracy. We're going to look at the reading rate. And then we're going to be able to drill down there. And we have suggestions for what the teachers would then do with that small group table. So one thing you might notice on this chart is that, go to the next one, yeah. Is that we've removed the Fountas and Pinnell assessment. So one of the things that this was a big debate in our committee, and we went back and forth on what's the best way to answer our question and what's the best way to meet the needs of our students. And so we really dug into that assessment, and it's kind of a hot button topic for many, many school districts that have been using this assessment for a long time. But what we found is that it doesn't have the reliability and the teacher usability factor that we would need for our teachers to be able to make those targeted decisions that we want them to make. And new research and information is showing us that there's some potential for bias in there from the teacher's perspective in terms of the teacher's grading of the assessment and the assessment itself, just by lens of the text and things, nature of the text and things that they're presented with. So, our request to the board is twofold. We're seeking approval first for the removal of the twice-yearly Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment testing, and we'd like to replace it with that flowchart framework that you saw us present.
Thank you. So one of the reasons why we're bringing this and took this to EPLC and to the board at the next board meeting for approval is because the F&P assessment was embedded in the already approved curriculum that we were using as a school district. So because we're pulling that out and we are now embedding a new process that is consistent with our new approach and pedagogical approach, that's why we're bringing this to the board to adjust our practices.
I just want to make sure that I understand the change. The removal is you're removing the more formal Fountas and Pinnell since you found that that's not sufficient, and the framework is more like an individualized. The teachers are looking at each student separately instead of administering a formal assessment in this case.
Yeah,
obviously they have other formal assessments, but this
Yes.
is swapping out one of the formal assessments for a more case-by-case basis.
Exactly. When we initially looked at all the assessments that we were using, Fountas and Pinnell was meant to be a diagnostic assessment when it was originally adopted. Meaning, like, I can assess one student side by side and diagnose what I need to teach them next from this assessment. And when we looked at Fountas and Pinnell and considered the fact we're only administering it twice a year, we realized it wasn't really serving that diagnosed need that we were looking for and teachers are asking for. So this flow chart we're hoping is going to lead to that kind of like diagnose, prescribe type teaching where we can really get in there with kids and prevent future gaps and reading difficulties.
Any questions or thoughts?
Can you give us maybe a couple examples of the Fountas and Pinnell things that the diagnostics, a question or a reasoning that, you felt it was not adequate?
Yeah, so what the test looks like is there are level text A, B, C, D, and those itself, there's a lot of research that would say, I can test Gigi on this level J text in Fountas and Pinnell, and just because she passes the level J with me, meaning she reads it at a certain level of accuracy and can answer some kind of within the text comprehension questions, she could go pick up any other book in the library that maybe would seemingly be about the same level, and that doesn't translate. So as a teacher, I'm sending my students off saying, like, you're a level J, read level J books, with the hope that they're able to access those books, and we're finding through research studies that actually they're not. So it's not translating those skills. But what we would do is it'd be a one-on-one test. So like G, if I was testing Gigi, she'd have the book open. What's J? That's not the My Neighbor or the Carousel book, right? But she'd read out loud to me for a few minutes, and I'd track, what mistakes is she making. And then she'd finish it kind of independently. And then we'd ask, a couple retell questions, a couple recall questions, and then maybe a couple inferencing questions like, why did the author do that? Or what other ending might be appropriate? And so the teacher, that's where the potential for subjectivity can come in, is because there's no rubric, there's no like, this is what his child should say. And so if I'm a first grade teacher and I've got a really strong reader, I might be super impressed that they're answering these questions. I'm, oh, give them a higher one, give them a higher one, give them a higher one. But they're not actually answering the questions to the depth that level would truly show for understanding. So it's also a cumbersome test that takes quite a long time to administer. And so teachers historically have gotten a sub-release day so that they can read one-on-one with the students. But then they only do that one time. And then you go through the whole rest of the year. And hopefully they're reading with kids every day, right? That's part of our curriculum. But in that formalized F&P way, they don't have to do it necessarily until the end of the year.
Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Just had a question. So your early chart, where you showed the levels of engagement, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of our students, do we track like the percentage of students by grade level that require that level 1, level 2, level 3?
Each building does that.
Every building does. And we have, through our MyStar Illuminate data collection, we have every student that's labeled as a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 student in there. So when teachers sit down and they have meetings about students, they're able to pull all of their tier 2 students. These are our kids that need this specific support system. This process is going to kind of narrow that focus even more so. It'll provide not that this is a child that's a level 2 because they're reading at a level E. This is a level 2 because their phonological awareness is at under the 30th percentile. So we're going to target our intervention around phonemes. So they really are able to pinpoint through a more appropriate way doing it like this.
What percentage of our overall,
Every building is so different.
yeah, but I mean, as a district, do we understand the percentage?
I would say we probably have about 10 to 15% of our students that are tier 2 and about 5% of our students that are tier 3 across the district.
Mm-hmm.
Some buildings are higher. They might have more like 25% of their students are, and some buildings are lower. They might have only 5% of their students that are tier 2.
And the expectation, and we're tracking that number decreases from K through 5. And I noticed that one of the middle school principals is now part of that group. That's probably new, right, with 5th grade going to the middle school.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in 6th, and maybe you don't know this, but what happens in 6th grade?
Sure.
7th grade, 8th grade, is it?
So we are adjusting our approaches right now for the middle school. We are bringing some of our elementary focus and have had a multitude of meetings actually this year to develop an MTSS process that will probably come up next year with the middle school, and then we're going to take that to the high school after that. But at this time, what we have is we have academic assistance class, we have readings foundations class, math foundations class at the middle school, that if students are in 5th grade and are not performing at a tier 1 level, they will get those additional supports in the middle school.
And they use NWEA also to identify. So that's their initial screener, just at same as the elementary school level.
Okay, thank you.
Who delivers the MTSS supports?
So the
Variety of
tier,
people, I'm sure.
the tier 1 and tier 2 is coming from the classroom teacher. The tier 3 is from a literacy specialist.
So we're not pulling, because I know at one point we had elective teachers that were pulled in to do some
Oh
of that.
yeah, we used to have that time. And some buildings, I think we do have some additional support for that, but they wouldn't be utilizing this. They might be providing that MTSS support in, I know in one building, I worked with those teachers to kind of develop a little bit. They were doing some handwriting stuff and some other things. But I know that's depending
Yeah,
on the
that's-
schedule.
It depends on the special schedule and what that looks like from year to year. Each year it's been actually condensed, because we don't have the grant money to support that any longer. Mhm. All right, well, thank you both very much.
Thank you,
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry I had to run to the other.
Double
You are
booked.
welcome to stay, or you're welcome to leave. All right, thank you very much. This was going to go to the Board of Education. I'll give a brief presentation to them on the 28th, I believe. And then we'll be asking for approval actually on the 28th as well. So after today, I'll send some information to the board on what next steps are. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight.
All right. Lisa, so you didn't miss a ton. You missed the pledge and our introductions, and then you pretty much saw most of the presentation. So are you good with us just kind of moving along the line?
I am.
All right.
Just want to give my apologies. My dad was back out of the hospital again, and so I had some medical situations I had to deal with him. The traffic was terrible coming back from where he's at, so.
All right. So we have a presentation on the board curriculum communications class, which is a 6th grade class that we found there were some things we wanted to adjust. And one of the things that we've put forth and really had enough emphasis on in the past couple years is really that maintenance focus. You know, we don't want to stop a curriculum review. We want to continue always sustaining the review process so that if there's something that we feel that needs to be adjusted, we will adjust it. And what we found in 6th grade communications is an area that we wanted to make some adjustments. So Sara and Melissa are here to give a brief presentation. This one, it wasn't as big as a change as it was with the ELA assessment, but the same process. We always look at our strategic plan as we talked about in our last presentation. We always look at those phases of review. This is a phase 4 review because it's not a full ELA review process, but it is a maintenance review that we want to focus on the communication curriculum. And our focus is always the same, where we want to provide a rigorous and relevant curriculum that's aligned pre-K through graduation. So Sara and Melissa will give you a brief history of what and why, and we'll go from there.
All right. I'm happy to jump in. So we had redone the whole ELA curriculum for middle school and kind of revamped all of it right around 2018. And so then one of the things that happened is we looked at when we reconfigured and we adjusted some things that we wanted to dive into what happened with 6th grade communications. And so if some of you have been around a long time, you know, we used to have something called informational. That was an every other day course for the full year. 6th grade communications became a course for our 6th graders every other day. And it became just for a quarter of the year instead of the whole year. So, excuse me, for half a year. And so really what they're focusing on is they're talking about informational tests, they're talking about speaking and listening, and they're diving into persuasive writing and reading. And one of the things that happened is that when this rolled out, it was during the time of the pandemic, and so we had every intention of reviewing right then as soon as we had done it, and then it didn't quite look the way we had thought it had looked, and we didn't quite have the time together. And so we have come together now and had some great conversations across all 3 middle schools. It was really fun to listen to. I'm gonna kind of turn over to Melissa because I just got to listen to the rich conversation, and just our kids are really lucky to have the English department that we do. So so we can talk about kind of what we did or what we're proposing, and as Melissa said, it's not a whole lot, it just is a little couple of tweaks here and there.
So hi everybody, I'm Melissa Frame. I am an ELA teacher at Brownell. I've been a 7th and 8th grade teacher for 22 years, and before that I was here at North for 6 or 7 or 6. So anyway, I've been in ELA for a long time. I used to be courier, so I know, at least I taught your kids, for example, and now I'm Frame. So hi. So yes, we looked at the 6th grade curriculum, and basically, as Sara said, we really just needed a chance to get together and kind of dive into the 6th grade communications class because it was something that was a change from prior to reconfiguration. So what we noticed is that we wanted to revisit that curriculum to place a greater emphasis on informational text concepts. What we noticed as a department looking across the 3 middle schools is that we didn't have necessarily a close alignment on what we were doing in all 3 middle schools and what resources we were using. We have the same resources, but we were using them in different ways, which we tend to do in ELA. So what we wanted to do was place a greater emphasis on informational text. And so what we did is we looked at the resources that we have that are already district approved, and we met to create a pacing guide for this 6th grade communications class that we did not have before. So we are still working on that, but really we have a very good document in place. We met for a half day or a full day, actually a full day, I think, at Pierce, that we really got a lot of work done with teachers from all of our middle schools. So we have that pacing guide so that teachers can draw upon it in order to ensure consistency across the district. We've had new teachers, we've had retirements, we have new people coming in. We want to make sure that everybody understands what the curriculum is and what those resources are. We're also trying to make sure that we more accurately reflect grade 6 ELA state standards and the essential classroom practices in disciplinary literacy. And one of the things that we found is we've shifted the poetry standards. They are already covered in our 6th grade ELA literary text, so in the regular 6th grade ELA class, in other words. So communications is an add-on that they take, and so poetry is in 6th grade ELA, 7th grade ELA, 8th grade ELA. So we wanted to shift that poetry focus and make more of an emphasis on informational text.
We know, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
We just know that informational text is so important, and we found that when the adjustment took place back in 2018-19, when we shifted to a new practice, and then the pandemic happened, we didn't have time, like Sara said, to evaluate, really how the informational text was being embedded. And really 50% of what we do should be focused on informational text. So we wanted to make sure we really hit that hard and embedded that into this communications class. So that goes to the point in the beginning of the year when we did the middle school study, how are we making sure that we're supporting our students in the area of ELA and giving them as much time, time on task as they were getting in the elementary school. And I know we talked a lot about 5th and 6th grade, and this is one of those areas that we are increasing that focus.
I know that when Common Core came out, there was a big move to informational text. Mm-hmm. So that was part of the Common Core standards, and of course, then that is embedded in all the standardized testing.
Yep.
A lot of the concerns that came out initially with that move was that kids were being given documents out of context, without any supporting documents, and they were supposed to read, the informational, and a certain amount of that can be helpful, but I know that there were a lot of concerns from teachers and parents at that point, because kids didn't have any, I don't teach personally, my own way of teaching is not to teach without giving some kind of context. I'm always going to support whatever I'm teaching. I taught music history, which is a better, analogy than like,
right.
general music or choral music. But I might give them something, but then, I'm always supporting it. So how does that informational work now with this age level? Because my opinion, kids of that age need, if you just give them a document,
Absolutely.
Support.
So I can answer part of that, and then maybe, so a couple of things that we have that we didn't have prior to COVID, for example, a couple of resources. One would be Common Lit. I don't know if you're familiar with Common Lit, but we use that. And what you can do, especially with Common Lit, is you can put in short stories or novels that you're teaching students, and it will bring up suggested, you can kind of click buttons, suggested informational text that will go with those titles. And then you can also narrow that down to grade level, to Lexile level, to even specific skills within that informational text, so that it'll bring up questions that maybe are word study questions or author's purpose questions. And so it's really, really useful tool for the teacher to be able to make that connection between, so for example, the 6th grade communications teacher is also the 6th grade ELA teacher. And so they'll have that knowledge of here's what we're reading in that 6th grade class. They can bring in the communications text that will go along with what they're reading in the fiction aspect. So we have that, and then the other one, Newsela or Newsela, people pronounce that different ways as well. And that's also very similar. They have a search tool again. I was teaching the novel Chains with my 8th graders, and I put that in Newsela, and it pulled up a bunch of informational texts that could be used to pair with that novel. The short story Flowers for Algernon, a lot of informational texts and activities. So we do have those texts there for us. And then also, we have so many copies of our former textbooks that we used to always use, and those, of course, also have plenty of text that will go with stories that we still use. So even though we do not necessarily open up the textbook anymore, a lot of those short stories that we've used over the years are now on Common Lit or available as electronic copies that we can give students.
And I'd say to kind of piggyback off that too, we all know that it doesn't just happen in ELA, and so it's something that the middle school has done a lot of work with this year, and we're really proud of the fact that we've dug into these essential classroom practices for disciplinary literacy. So what does literacy look like in math? What does it look like in science? What does it look like in social studies? And so helping kids know that you're going to read or you're going to see different things. It might be a graph, it might be a math, it might be even just your word problems, because if you're doing 6th grade math at home this year, you will know that those are some big word problems, and just helping kids to know how to dig into that. And so that's been really powerful this year too. So they kind of go right together.
And then one other thing to add, and I know I've had the opportunity for 2 years to go into the social studies classroom as an ELA consultant, and so I can recommend some works for the social studies teachers. So we do we'll have meetings together as departments with social studies and ELA, so that's another opportunity for informational.
I think this is fabulous. I mean, as an English teacher, English consultant, like this is a bonus. Like this is exactly what the kids need. And the English teacher is getting an additional opportunity to dive into speaking and listening in a targeted area, connecting it, the informational text, what they're already doing. This is
and we're really excited to be able to implement this. And now that we're, we've got the 5th grade has been there for a couple of, we're able to now move forward with planning and working together, kind of collaborating in those areas. So it's great.
So it was nice, even though we had thought to do it sooner, it's kind of the conversation almost richer now. We've done it for a few years, and like Melissa said, we have that 5th grade perspective too of what they're doing and how to keep accelerating it versus I would be honest and say sometimes middle school, 6th grade, they started, okay, well, we're not ready yet. And now we know, no, they are ready.
Well, they're ready.
They're running, which is really great. So we're like building right off of what they've done in 5th grade. And so it's been, I think they're getting a really great instructional curriculum. So good for our kids.
Absolutely. And I just want to share that I really enjoyed the time that I spent talking to all of you and just watching you interact with each other, that one day. I could tell that your passion for your content is there, so
Yep.
Appreciate that.
They're very.
I feel like I just started teaching, honestly, so it's a good feeling.
That's good.
All right.
Well, thank you very much. Any other questions? All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
very
much.
much.
You're
both.
welcome, thanks.
And I'm gonna have to say hello just for my girls, because they would,
Please say
they would, if they hear that,
Oh my gosh, Greg and tell me,
Alexandra,
Yeah.
we had, you had
Oh, yeah.
Christina, I think.
I did, and there was.
Did you have Athena?
No,
Okay, I think that's where,
Gregory's the oldest.
Gregory's the oldest.
Yeah, I had him. How old is he now?
He's gonna be 33.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, tell them I said hi, please.
I will. The time capsule thing was always like, it was just great. Like, we got those.
Yeah, I've
time
gotta get those out. Got a few from, my 8th graders were 2020.
Oh my gosh.
So now they're
Bless you.
graduating, so I've gotta get those out.
That's gotta be an interesting
I imagine.
time capsule one, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Thank you.
It was hilarious too, because each of my kids did such a different thing.
Of
So I
course.
think Alex was like really right, detailed. Christina a little less. So Greg's, you know what his time capsule was?
Probably.
A $5 bill.
Yeah.
And he said, go buy yourself something.
Yep, I've had students do that.
But thank you.
Sounds like you're welcome.
Appreciate it, and I'll tell them hello.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Yes, thank you. Good night.
Okay, next on the agenda, you could go on, Lisa?
We are good to go in.
All right, is the elementary program of studies. This is really actually a simple one. Each year, the program of studies goes through, and it's just a culmination of everything we've done through the year and any of the changes. The program study also, we changed the dates, any names of new people that have been hired in the district, or new titles, or new board members, phone number changes, and I don't know how this happens, but every year there's a typo that's found. Even though it's, this could be something that we wrote 6 years ago, but we find a typo. So, or a formatting situation. So that's most of the changes on here. Some of the library information that we did this year, that was all adjusted, and that's been adjusted. The biggest change that didn't go to a formalized review process is really the language from physical education. So during the last review, there's been some changes in the language specific to the SHAPE standards, so which are actually consistent with our core curriculum that we teach. So the PE department just wanted to make sure that they were aligned. So they aligned that, and those changes are being reflected in our program studies. And then we just had a link that needed to be replaced because the old link was not working any longer. Just little things like that. And then all of the things that you heard today, we are going to adjust into the program studies with the middle school program studies, which that'll be next fall. You'll get that. But with the elementary changes, with removing F and P and including the diagnostic approach that you heard today, that'll be adjusted in that program studies as well. So, but that goes to the board every year, and I'll give a brief presentation on the 28th about that to the board. Any questions there?
Clean up those typos, Keith.
I think what happens is when you format something and adjust something.
Oh, I know.
It
It's so easy. It happens.
All right, next on the agenda was just something that we've been wanting to get to for a while, and we just haven't. I know it was on the schedule back in February, and then that was Valentine's Day and we didn't meet, and then we had long meetings on the 6th, March 6th, so we didn't get to it then. But the 21st, what I want to do is take you through a little bit of an activity. I know you've seen this document, the pros and cons to the current system. There's been a question about 2 areas of our grading policy. One is specific to the 50% credit for a zero, and then the other is the 20% exam weighting at high school. So I'm going to read to you the exact policy. Now our grading policy is actually pretty large. These are just 2 little snippets of the entire policy that we're going to talk about tonight. And does everyone have a pen? Because I'm going to have you do an activity on this piece of paper. You do? All right, great. And you're the only person back here, but at least give me a copy. Thank you. All right, so the 2 things that we wanted to discuss, and Lisa brought this to me, I don't know, probably January timeframe-ish, maybe even before. And we wanted to take a look at 2 specific areas of the policy. One is, and this is how the language is directly in our board policy. For the purpose of determining final semester grades, all courses will use the following system. Quarter 1 equals 40%, quarter 2 equals 40%, and then the final examination is 20%. So that's one area to take a look at. The next area is consistent with the intent of the current grading system. All quarter and exam grades that fall below 50% will be tabulated as, with 50% being the minimum percentage for computing a final grade. Now this is policy. We're a curriculum committee, but it's good to talk about these things and determine if we want to push this to a policy review to make some adjustments or changes. I created a list based off of what I've heard just from people, from some principals, from some of you, from my kids, just created this pros and cons list. This is not meaning that I feel one way or another way. It's just a pros and cons list of things that I've captured from everyone. I do know that there's a lot of opinions on these two items. And I personally have 2 kids in high school. And the policy probably works really well for one kid and the policy doesn't work so well for the other for a variety of reasons. So it's, how do you develop a policy that fits everybody? So that's kind of the conversation I just want to start today. And I want you to just take a minute to take a look at the pros and cons list. And I want you to just, I'm going to read through it. So we'll just read it together.
Can I just bump in here for 1 second? As far as these policies, can you clarify what age levels these policies are applying to?
Yes, it's for high school.
So we're
It's
just
high
talking
school.
high school, we're not talking anything below, not middle school.
Not middle school.
This is high school,
So,
okay.
middle school, the policy specifically says high school, kind of in the title, and then all of the information is below.
I just thought it'd be important that we have that clarified before we get into.
Which is also an interesting conversation, because
Middle school.
should we have it for middle school too? Elementary, it's different. The whole grading practice is a little bit different from, at the elementary level, and it's about, meeting standards, approaching standards, exceeding standards, and so on and so forth. But at the middle school and high school, should we be similar? I'm gonna give you my personal opinion when we get through with everything. Because I do have an opinion on all this, but these are just pros and cons that I've heard from a variety of people. One of the pros is emphasis on consistent performance. With each quarter contributing significantly 40% of the final grade, students are encouraged to maintain consistent performance throughout the year, rather than relying on the final exam to boost their grade. So that might be a pro to the 40% piece. Another pro could be reduced final exam pressure. So allocating only 20% of that final exam can reduce stress and pressure on the student. They don't have to rely solely on their performance in a high stakes exam. So I don't know if you remember, but in college, sometimes your final exam was 80% of the grade, or 60% of the grade. That's a lot, Is that how we want to approach things with our high school kids? That's a question there.
I had one class at Wayne where it was, the midterm was 50% and the exam was 50%, and the professor just said, I don't care if you come to class, I don't care if you do the homework, but this is it. Those are your 2 grades, that's it.
Those are your choices.
For sure.
All right, opportunity for improvement. If a student performs poorly in quarter 1, they still have 60% left to improve upon. So it offers a chance for redemption. So that could work for some kids for sure. A minimum grade threshold. Setting for 50% as a minimum percentage helps students who struggle significantly, preventing extremely low scores from proportionately dragging down their overall grade. So that could be a help to some students. Those are pros. Cons. So there's a potential for complacency. Knowing that no single grade can fall 50%, sometimes kids might calculate, all right, if I get 50% on this, I'm still gonna have a 95% in the class. I don't have to try so hard this time. And that's something my son might do.
That's not per assignment though, right?
No, it's for the final,
So you couldn't get an A if you failed something.
Correct. The policy is consistent with the intent of the current grading system, all quarter and exam grades. So it's the quarter grade and the exam grades.
Right.
Yep.
Are you sure? I think even the high schools may have done it differently.
I know my last year, between the 2 high schools, I had a counselor call me and say that I needed to change the assignment grades to 50. And I said I wasn't doing that.
Was that for all students, or were it just certain students that might have been in their kind of maybe an IEP or something like that?
They did not.
Oh, they didn't?
No, this is my personal finance class.
Okay.
And, but I was told, you need to change that, and I said, from what I understand, it's just the quarter grade.
So I guess I would need to get a little bit more clarification.
Yeah.
And that should be consistent across the board.
It should be.
If one teacher's doing.
Yeah.
Or schools.
Yeah.
Right, or schools, or I I'd even go to what you said, teachers.
Teachers.
You know, you might have teachers that are doing a different practice from one space to the next.
Yeah, and I can't say it was consistent with all the counselors, I only dealt with that one counselor in that issue,
Okay.
yeah,
That was always a question that we had
yeah.
at South coming out, was the inconsistency. between-
It's a good thing we're doing this then.
It is. Another con was diminished incentive for mastery with such a significant portion of the grade being determined by continuous assessments of 80%, students might not feel that they need to fully master the material. And you know, they can pass without excelling on that final exam. Reduced impact of the final exam. Students who perform better in an exam setting than continuous assessments might find that the system's disadvantageous to them. The final exam, you know, kind of having that less weight. Potential unfairness, or grade inflation, excuse me. Artificially raising a grade below 50% to 50% could lead to the grade inflation where the final grades do not accurately reflect the student's understanding or capabilities. Potential for unfairness, students who barely miss the 50% mark might seem that there's a disadvantage to someone that might have 5% on it. And then less emphasis on the cumulative learning. So with less weight on the final exam, there might be less emphasis on, you know, making sure that we synthesize all of the information and have that as mastery at the end of the school year. So those are pros and cons that I've heard from a variety of people out there. Not necessarily saying one way is better than another, that we should do something different, but that is just kind of the conversation and where it's went. And what I'd like all of you to do is I'd like to do kind of a 3A protocol activity. So when you think of this, when you read those pros and cons, I would like you to kind of put an A next to something that you might agree with. And then we're going to do an activity after that. So take a look at those and just start thinking, you know, just agree. What are some things that you might agree with based off of what's on this document?
As many as we want.
As many as you want. You could agree with all of them. You might agree with one and not another. I should have music on instead of taking classes. And as you saw when we came here, it was 10 minutes fast, so it's faster than each second. So, right, the next thing I'd like you to do, as you keep doing the writing the A, I want you to think about if there's something on this document that you would kind of argue. I want you to underline it. take about another minute and a half or so, and then we'll have some dialogue about those two things. All right, so before we start, having some dialogue around what we agree with and what we argue with, I just want to set some norms just in the room. As you can see, pros and cons, people have a variety of opinions about, these two kind of grading policies. Today's not about making a determination of what we should do or what we shouldn't do. It's just to get some voice out there and what we think. And no opinion that is said across this table is a bad opinion. It's just just talking through, because what might be right for one kid might not be right for the next kid. Like I said, I have 2 kids, and these policies could work for one and not for the other for a variety of different reasons. So let's just kind of have a conversation, non-judgmental conversation. We'll start with what do we agree with? When we think of the pros and cons, what are some things that we agree with on this list that we hear?
I mean, I agreed with the first 3 of the pros. Emphasis on consistent performance, the reduced final exam pressure, and the opportunity for improvement. So student, they do poorly in quarter 1, which is very common in both middle and high school, might add. Kids come in and new class, new teacher, they have to figure things out, and having that incentive to, the rest of the second quarter and the final to improve their grade usually works really, I think it's a good practice. Cons, I agreed with the first of the cons, the potential for complacency. Knowing that no single grade can fall below 50% for final grade calculations might lead some students to put in minimal effort. I've seen that on a regular basis with that kind of policy personally, so I agree with that. I also agreed with the reduced impact of the final exam. Students who perform better in exam settings than continuous assessment might find the system disadvantageous. That would be my oldest son, who never cracked a book through high school at South and took all honors and AP classes, went to college with 21 AP credits, and didn't crack a book. He could pass a test, he had a photographic memory. His siblings, not one of his 5 siblings, was that good of a test taker. And and I had a couple kids that had, severe test anxiety. So, but that definitely is disadvantageous to a child like my son, who I don't think is the norm in the classroom. I've had very few students over the years that don't have to do some kind of studying for, an exam situation. So I think that's really kind of a small group of kids overall. Reduced impact to the final exam. Students who perform better in exam settings I already addressed that, sorry. I also agreed with the grade inflation. Artificially raising grades below 50% to 50% could lead to grade inflation, where the final grades do not accurately reflect the student's understanding or capabilities, and I've seen that very, very regularly with that policy. Potential unfairness, students who barely miss the 50% mark might feel disadvantaged compared to those who performed significantly worse but received the same minimum 50% grade. And I've seen that. And I think that's the one that I struggle with the most as a teacher when I have a kid. And I've worked in a couple districts that have had policies with the 50% and applied them very differently. One district, the 50% was only for regular assignments and test scores were fully weighted. And then another district, it was tests that were the 50% and everything else was supposed to be. So there was, even between different districts, there wasn't a consistency in that kind of policy. But what really kind of always got my heart was to have that kid that worked their butt off the whole semester, might have gotten sick, just barely squeaking by. And they might have, had an illness or had something happen and they worked really hard to get that credit. And then the kid that wasn't there
Didn't do anything.
regularly or just didn't care. And the students, kids are smart. Like there are a lot of kids that they're like, yeah. And they'll just flat out tell you to your face, like, doesn't matter, I'm gonna get 50% anyway, so. So when you hear that, and I'll be honest, I don't know a teacher that I've ever worked with that liked that policy. I mean, every teacher I've ever worked with just has had nothing but issues with the 50% credit policy. So that's my teacher opinion.
Can I just get a little clarification? 50% each quarter, you couldn't have 50%, could you? I think you could. Was there also a qualifier about C+? Because you could do 50%, and maybe get 60% on the exam. And
This was,
was there any qualifier
No.
to passing? So a student could do that?
correct. Yeah, there was no qualifier with respect
Is
to
it just
that
for
process.
testing
It's
now,
just
if I
testing.
remember?
Correct.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's okay. I agree with a lot of, what you've said and when I hired, back when I hired in 2003, we didn't have the 50% grade. And I remember, I think it was 2011, 2012, they were discussing, I know we discussed the concept of this, and this is at South, and in one of our staff meetings, and every teacher said, no, we don't want that. We didn't think it was fair. So, and then even now, and like you said, certain students that work their tails off to get that grade, they're working super hard for it. And then I got a couple in the back corner that when they show up or if they show up and not getting everything, getting everything done, not caring. And again, I can look at my two sons. One worked super hard for his grades and the other one, didn't, and he excelled. My older son was, well, it's not fair. Well, that's just the way, his brain worked. But for me, and what I taught, I had a math credit for seniors. So the majority of my students were seniors. And, when we talk about the math, it was consumer math. It was for the, the right brain students that love to read and write, but they couldn't do that, the algebra, they struggled with that. So it was more practical, but it was also, I had students I had some with the 504s or the IEPs, I had that. I had some students that, not that they couldn't, it's that they wouldn't. So for me, I agree with the pros, I do that. And when I look at the cons, same thing, potential for, complacency or the grade inflation. What I struggled with was with the student that pretty much showed up and did nothing, argue with the phone or number of issues. And then they wouldn't turn, I had one student that their quarter grade was 3%. And it wasn't because they couldn't. And it was, I think their ACTs, were at, 27, scored at 27. So it's not like he didn't have the ability to do it. So that particular circumstance was frustrating. But I also look to just, the variety of learners that we have in the classroom and how we have to adapt. I was lucky too that I could refer to like a team of other teachers that we shared the same students, whether it was a special ed department, or the LRC, that I worked directly with them. And this is what we're doing, and this is what we what I need or what I'm looking for. But I'll be honest with you, I struggled with it. I don't like it. But I agree with a lot of what you put here, both the pros and cons. I think the potential for unfairness, definitely when you have one student working so hard. So, but yeah, that's it.
Anyone else have anything to share?
I think that potential for unfairness, at first I kind of just put question marks by it, but, because I don't really believe anybody should know what's happening with anybody else. But it becomes, I think, even an issue in the classroom then, because then you have someone who's just choosing perhaps not to do something, knowing that by the end of the semester, things will be okay for that person. And it just sets kind of a tone, so it's an interesting con. Yes, and I agreed with the top three for the pros as well. Yeah, I do. And I hate when they use the word like reduce stress for a final, because I don't care. I mean, that stress is still gonna be there for the A+ first quarter, A+ second quarter, to keep the A+ on the final exam, right? Because the final exam could bring that down for a double A+ student, right? It doesn't really change grades all that much, that 20%, but it could. And to me, that's somebody that would have a lot of stress.
And if I could add one more thing too, I don't think it's reflective of the real world. So if you're gonna do my performance review, you're gonna cut me some slack? Or if I'm going to my job, okay, and how are we preparing them for the real world? You know, quick story, my husband was at Detroit Chassis, and they hired a guy, and he would come in late and leave early and everything, and they said to him, you gotta put more hours in. He says, I'm working full time. He was putting in 32 hours a week. He thought that was full time. They were, no, it's 40 hours a week. And all the other engineers were putting in 48, hours, and he quit. No, it's too much work. So, I just feel that it's not reflective of what all of us in here do, I think it's, yeah.
So, engineers.
I don't wanna, I feel too part of it is just almost like a social promotion. You didn't do the work, and I'm gonna send you out in the world, and I don't want them to fail. I want them to be ready, and I want them to learn the content, master the content. So.
Well, it's interesting when this policy started going in. Well, I've seen teaching high school is I saw a lot of kids getting into college and then failing out.
Yeah.
So when they come back to you and they're crying because they're working 3 jobs to pay back loans, and you knew, and every colleague that had that student might have been a great kid, awesome kid, beautiful person, but they weren't college material. And so that grade inflation, and then when they get into the real, because you get to college, and now you've also, you've got every major university adding remedial classes. They're all, now you've got, I had an alumni come back crying, beginning of the fall after she graduated, and she was literally sobbing because she had been placed in 0 credit classes for an entire semester. She was financially, just barely, her parents didn't have 2 nickels, and now she had to pay for an entire semester of 0 credit classes. And this was a kid that was a top student all the way through high school. And now she made it through, she graduated, she did, well in the end. But I remember, she just sat and cried on my shoulder and said, it's so hard, I can't believe it. I don't know how I'm gonna pay another semester of college. And that really stuck with me. So I don't think we're doing students always a service by making everything easier, because it doesn't continue.
If you look at, I think all the teachers, we want our students to succeed, and we're going to work hard to find that. So,
and the other thing I wanted to just chime in too, the other concern I have with the 50% thing is we have kids with 504s and IEPs, and those kids have the ability to get modifications and accommodations in their assignments, always have.
They
So I
have
think
support.
they have supports in place legally. So I mean, I think that we have to be careful when we're making a policy and lumping those students in. We have the ability, and always have had the ability, to modify assignments or to accommodate different things, you know, in the classroom for students that have those IEPs and 504s. So.
And as teachers, we're given, you know, we're told
Yeah, you're
what
provided,
modifications we have to make.
Right,
so.
absolutely.
All right, Sarah Bell.
Did you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a hot topic, no matter where you go. I mean, this policy is very consistent with a lot of districts everywhere. A lot of districts in Macomb have something very similar to this. I think it comes back to what's our purpose for grading? Like, is it for compliance, to get kids to do the work? Or is it to actually show mastery? And I think that's a larger conversation that feeds into this. Thinking about what you said about preparing kids for the real world, I absolutely agree. But I think that looks different for an 18-year-old graduating versus a 14-year-old freshman. Like, I think, I don't know where the break is. I'm thinking of my daughter, who's going to be a very young freshman. She will be, how old are you when you're a freshman? 14? Like, she will have just turned 14, like right before her, you know, freshman year. Whereas there are some kids who have already been 14, you know, and that's, so when I'm thinking ahead, I'm like, God, you know, do I want her to be, you know, she can work her butt off and then still get zero, like, not be rewarded for her hard work? But again, I think it just comes down to the purpose of grading. Is it compliance?
It's very
Is
complex.
it compliance? Is it mastery? And then we kind of have to hold with that.
Very
Thank you
complex.
for refocusing that on what is the purpose of grading, because I think if we drop this policy, it becomes more punitive, like you didn't, because for the kids who are, you're saying can but won't, they don't have a chance to do better the next quarter. And for the kids who got less than a 50%, but really were trying, they also don't have a chance to do better the next quarter. So they don't have, what's your motivation then? You're no longer motivated to learn. And we're trying to, what we want to do is get these kids learning, not necessarily get them understanding that, you know, this is the way the world works. We want them to learn as much as possible. And if they get a 20% their first quarter and they go do the math and be like, doesn't matter how well I do, I'm gonna fail.
Well, and I'm gonna respectfully disagree with that, because I have had students that have not passed a quarter, but were able to be successful with the next quarter, and they were able to pass. So, but it's a very complex issue. But no, and again, my students, they were high school seniors. They're, you know, out the door. And the type of class I taught as well. And then also to the students that I had. So, but it is, and also I come from human resources from Ford Motor, hiring people, firing people. That was my former career. So I also bring that into the world. I bring in, you know, the experience of having a family business for 45 years. Who are we looking for? So that allowed me to share with the students. This is what we need, or this is what we're looking for. And when it comes to the complacency with some of the students, or, you know, I had some that worked so hard, and they did a great job. I had others that worked so hard, not so much. But then I had a few that just, if they showed up, okay, or when they did show up, they weren't all in.
Yes,
So,
I heard you saying that.
Yeah.
My point about the 50% is, yes, you can struggle one quarter and do well the next
they
quarter.
could, absolutely they
Especially
can.
when, like you said, freshmen coming in and they just didn't understand the way the tests worked. They didn't realize, you know, the
Freshman year is
strategy
tough, yeah.
of all of the, of what the teacher's expectations were. So they really bombed the first quarter, but then they pull it out the second quarter. But if you get a lot below a 50%, you cannot pass. No matter how, even if you do really well the second quarter, but if we have that floor at 50%, the kids who don't want to try and are like, I can get 50% no matter what, that's still failing. They're still gonna fail. if they don't do anything, they have to at least try, and it gives that opportunity for, well, at least, okay, I really messed up this first quarter, but second quarter, if I do really well, it's gonna average out to a C, and a C is okay. We're not giving out A's to kids who, goofed around the whole first quarter. And I understand that in some schools, they do pass kids just to pass them and have the grade inflation and stuff, but every senior, recently graduated senior who's now a freshman or sophomore in college has come back and said, wow, freshman year of college was easier than my senior English class at Grosse Pointe South or Grosse Pointe North. So I think we're preparing kids really well for college, as long as they're taking the classes and taking them seriously. And I don't really have that concern that we're gonna have one of our top students coming back and saying, oh, I can't handle any college classes. I've never heard that from a student who felt that they were succeeding at one of our high schools. I understand that is the case in some places, but I wanna focus on like what we're doing here. And I think this addresses as you mentioned, if you're sick and you miss a whole bunch, or, just not understanding the expectations of high school, you can still pull it out by the end, and you have that motivation.
Well, and also
giving
too,
up.
though, circumstances like that, we've dealt with students and we make arrangements for that. We
But
work with
sometimes you
them.
don't always know. You don't always know what's going on, and I think, I just keep coming back to, they're kids. Like, these are 14-year-old kids who, they bomb freshman year, and then that discouragement and that disappointment of what they're gonna do with, like, we want them all to be successful, so what is the best way to make them be successful? Is it giving them that 3% on their report card, or 50%? Again, it's still failing, but there's still like that glimmer of hope, like, okay, I can do this, I can pull myself together.
I can pull out a C by the end of the semester, whereas if you have that 3% for the first quarter, you can't pass. And then what's the point of trying further? And I think our goal here is that we want them to learn. So if the 50% floor motivates them to be like, okay, well, the lowest I can get is 50%, so I'm gonna try for more. And there's always gonna be kids who don't wanna be there, and that's, I think, a separate issue. I don't know if we can police that with grading policies to force them to want to be there and do better. I think we need to find a way to reach them some other way, because yeah, I don't know that it matters that much. Yeah, they'll say like, oh, I don't care because I'm at least gonna get a 50. But even when we didn't have that policy, you had kids saying, well, I don't care because my parents don't care if I fail. Well, I don't care because I'm leaving school at 16 anyway. You've always got a few kids like that, and that's a separate issue no matter what our policies are, and we gotta address that.
There's always outliers for everything, and, kind of like I stated in the beginning, what policy works for one kid might not work for another kid, so we've kind of already done the second part, the argue. I think, I think we're in a good space right now to go to the next A, which is, what would we aspire to be with respect to this grading policy? Like, if you think of this grading policy right now, what do we want to aspire as a school district? How do we want to, kind of move forward? And take a look at this, and is there an adjustment that needs to happen, and what would that adjustment look like? What would, if you could make the rules, what would the rules be?
I like what the grading committee came up with for multiple pathways to mastery, I think is what you called it. Because I think some of this, the percentages and all that argument could be addressed by saying, well, because some kids aren't good test takers, and then the final exam is a huge pressure because I'm an A+ student all year, but now I'm stressed out. It's true that the A+ students are probably the ones most stressed about that last 20%, because that can take them down to like a B- if they totally fail it. They're not going to, but
50%.
that's true. With this policy, they would at least get a 50%. So, but it'll take their A+ down to an A-, and when you're going for those fractional GPAs, it's so important, right? So I think those are the kids who are most stressed about it. And if you have multiple pathways to mastery, and there's opportunities given for, you can do your final exam, or you can write me a really long essay that shows that you mastered it, or you know, well, obviously. Yeah, well,
Clearly you haven't been an English teacher in
Yeah.
this semester either.
yes, I know you don't wanna read the essay, I'm just for example, but like it would be different, you know,
Project-based approach or, right.
yeah, show it in the food sciences class in middle school, you know, show me that you can cook a meal, you know, from start to finish, you do the recipe, because I don't even know what exams they have for that kind of thing. So there's a lot of different ways that you can show, and I think it's more important that they show that they learned it than that they show that they can regurgitate it on a test, or, you know, any other assessments.
The application of their learning.
Yeah,
That looks
they,
like.
they need to be, because it sticks with you if you're doing it in a way that works best for you. Whereas I took a ton of AP tests as well and went into college as a sophomore, and I don't think I remember any of my AP exam content, but I remember the other learning that I did that I was really into, the essays that I wrote that were longer than my teachers wanted. And then they were like, please don't.
Please stop reading after a while.
All right, so I've got two things so far, multiple pathways to mastery and then application of learning. What else can you think of? What are some other thoughts?
I mean, my thoughts are always, the teachers have the ability to work with students in an individual manner already. They did before any of this kind of policy. Now, the exam, we're talking about two different things, so I don't want to mix them up. I'm referring more to the 50%. The 20% exam weighting, I mean, I'm comfortable with it personally. I think it's a good balance, especially at the high school level. I think that our district has always been a college-bound focused district, and I think that that has made us a destination for many, many years. People came here and knew, and I know that my children were very well prepared when they went to college. I think we also have a strong system in place. I think one of the strengths we have as a district is, which a lot of other districts don't have, many of our, majority of our, I want to say the majority, but many of our students matriculate all the way from K to 12, and that makes
It's a huge difference.
that right there is the difference between Grosse Pointe and a lot of other places. Because when you have kids, coming in, and their transcript looks like, you can't even, I remember counselors sitting there like trying to, figure out, because different districts call classes different things, and trying to make some sense of a transcript of a kid who's bounced. And unfortunately, schools of choice have disadvantaged a lot of kids because people are very quick to, I don't like this school, I'm gonna pull my kid, I'm gonna put him here, I'm not happy I didn't get the answer I wanted here, I'm gonna put him here, and this child goes through never being diagnosed with dyslexia or, a learning disability, or, you name it, or just struggling because there's been so many transitions. So that's our strength, and I think we do a really good job of preparing from 8th grade to the high school with our, transitions and visits and the supports we have for our incoming 9th graders. I think all 9th graders, every transition from school to school is tough on kids, right? I was one of the young kids. I was 17 when I graduated. My oldest daughter was 17. She was 17 when she graduated. Her birthday was December 15th. So she was the youngest kid in every class. And so, I struggle with it as a parent. We want to support our kids, but I think that our kids also learn by having sometimes a failure teaches you more than, a success, and makes you come back, and a kid that sometimes has to do summer school, sometimes that's a powerful motivator, or taking, a class can motivate you to, in the opposite way. So I'm not really, I think that we always have the ability, and I think maybe as a district, if we can have that, it's hard to put into a policy, but our teachers, knowing that we want our teachers to work with students to make them, so, I mean, and I think we all, as teachers, we want our kids to be successful. I mean, I bend over backwards to make things happen for my kids. If I have a kid that is, it doesn't matter the reason, right? They could be sick, they could have just had something happen and, you know, they kind of shut down for a while. I will do whatever I can to help that kid, you know, raise their grade. And I think most of the teachers that I know are like that. You know, we don't go out of our way to fail a kid.
Agree.
And I think there's more of us than there are. There's always gonna be, you know, that teacher, and I've had teachers that, I mean, I actually, you know, went to bat for some students that, you know, had serious medical, you know, kinds of situations, and a teacher was just refusing to unbend, and I, you know, tried to work and make things happen for that kid if I could, you know, by just having a conversation with somebody. So I think that when we start lowering and giving those, you know, blanket 50%, I've seen it cause nothing but the reverse problem. I have seen too much complacency, too much of I don't have to work hard because I know I got that. And that's not preparation for the world. We're educating. It's the same thing with discipline. We allow discipline sometimes to get out of control, and then that child goes and continues acting out when they go out into society because they've never been told no. They've never been said, this is the line, you know, you can't keep crossing this line. But it's, no, cross the line. Okay, we'll give you another chance. Cross the line, cross the line, cross the line. What do we teach them? So I'm of the opinion that personally, we need to have a system in place that makes us kids, and sometimes it might be painful. And then we try to make things happen by working with the students to help those students that need. And I'll be honest, I'll be very frank, I had a child with a 504. I was livid over the way my son's 504 was handled. And that child ended up being mostly homeschooled through high school. So I'm a living parent that said, this isn't working for my kid, and did it in a different way. So I feel for the situations where a child struggles, because I've been there as a parent. I've had the kid that excels, and I've had the kid that has struggled.
I think you're kind of providing the same kind of statement that I did in the beginning. You know, policies aren't going to work for everyone,
Right?
you know.
100%.
So no matter what policy we adjust, change, put a new policy towards it, it's going to work for some people and not for others. So I would love to aspire to a more consciously based approach, you know, really looking at a kid where they're at and bringing them along from that space. You know, we all have stories. I got stories about my own kids. I have stories about kids that I've worked with through the school district where a policy like this has worked for them and a policy has not worked for them. So I guess my recommendation at this point, maybe it will filter into our next agenda item today, and we only have a little bit of time because we're getting close to the end. But there's, you know, we did that activity, our narrow focus activity of what we want to talk about moving forward. I would like to see this be something, if we look at grading practices going through EPLC, kind of how it has in the past. It went through EPLC, and I don't know, you know, a lot of the history behind that. Dan Hartley kind of led that process. But maybe if we did it again, and we led it through a different lens of some of the conversations we just had tonight, maybe we could get to a different result when finally said and done. And maybe it's not the policy that needs to change. Maybe there needs to be a consistency process that changes across, you know, all of our schools and all of our teachers, so that they visibly know what the policy is, so they're aware of what direction they have to take in their classrooms. Sometimes there's so many policies, and I'll be honest, if I wasn't in the role that I was in right now, and I was a classroom teacher, I might not be diving into the policies and learning about every single policy we have in the school district until becomes necessary to. You know, I get principals that'll contact me and teachers that'll contact me, ask me questions from my role, what I do is I dive right into the school district policy, especially since I've taken the secondary role, because I want to learn, make sure that I'm following what our protocols are. Not everyone does that because they're just teaching the kids that are in front of them. So if we create a more consistent approach that is easier to maybe follow for classroom teachers, that they're aware of what every piece of that policy might be, maybe that could be our first step, but I think that should happen through that EPLC process. That's just my thoughts. I don't know if
Yeah, I would
if you
support
think.
the EPLC taking another look at it, and seeing what's been working, what hasn't, from the teachers who are actually implementing the policy.
Yeah, I think too, I was fortunate enough to have a team. I was able to have colleagues that I could work with when we have to focus on particular students, and that was really helpful. So it was a team approach. So
Is there a way to survey the teaching staff on those policies? Because we're only talking the high schools, right?
Because the other, that would just be high school. I mean, sure. I mean, I would like to see that through a protocol process with the EPLC, identifying a subcommittee, bring some teachers, parents, stakeholders on board, identify kind of what the approach is, take a look at our current policy. We probably would want to research what other districts are doing, just like you were saying, Macomb, but what are our peer districts doing? What's Wayne County doing? I could take that to our curriculum directors meeting in Wayne County and get their board policies, really do a review and really dive into it. And then I know they did a book study in the past, but maybe we don't need a book study. Maybe we need to just kind of take a look at what all these other districts are doing and just have open-ended conversation about what the best approach would be. Maybe some article reviews rather than a book study. Maybe another piece we could take a look at is what is curriculum-based or competency-based education? What does that mean? Does everyone know what that is? Maybe doing a review of that and how could that inform our practices versus doing a study of grading policies. Maybe it's our practices that we have to make sure that we're adjusting so that we're meeting every single kid where they're at, so that we're identifying what their potential goals are and processes for what mastery is versus saying that this is going to be this blanket result of what it's going to be. Because really colleges, they are looking at GPA, not EA, that's teachers union, GPA, but they're also looking at PSAT, SAT scores. They're looking at the M-STEP scores. How are we preparing kids to make sure that they're having mastery on those areas so that they're really showing a good showing to get into college with those PSAT scores?
Yeah.
And then if they're not, then what is the track that is going to make them most successful? Is it diving into CTE classes? Really, getting an experience there? Is there co-op opportunities? So I think sometimes school's not for everyone. School wasn't for me, and I don't know how I got to where I am today, but it's because I wanted to become a teacher to make it better for kids like me that didn't care for school that much. But how do we make sure that we're meeting each kid where they're at? I don't know if a policy is going to do that. I think a teacher's heart is going to do that, and we have a lot of heart in our district.
we do.
So how do we make sure that we tap into that more so than tapping into, we got to stick to this policy because that's what it says. But how are we going to sit down with this one student next to me and really hit their heart and get them to want to do the activities or the assignments? My kids go to Dakota, and I don't want to speak poorly about a school district or teachers or anything, but it breaks my heart when my kid comes home and says, I really didn't do much in school today.
Never want to hear that.
This is still a teenager. But what about the days when he comes home and says, oh my gosh, today was just amazing. I want more of those days, So he doesn't care about policy. I don't think kids really care about the policy as much as they care about wanting to learn and come to school and be motivated and excited to be here. So I would love to find a way to have a balance between those two. And maybe, if we get to more of a curriculum or a competency-based approach, maybe that's something that would be advantageous to inform our policy then. That's just my thinking. And I've been thinking about it a lot. And secondary is so different than elementary. And you know, I've lived in this elementary world my whole life. I almost feel that there's some elementary components that are going to benefit the middle school and high school if we bring that kind of approach to them.
Well, a lot of colleges are moving to competency-based classes as
They are.
well.
They are.
So, you know, the earlier we can get our students aligned to competency-based, and then hopefully we'll see that alignment between their actual, like, school grades and their test scores, because there's a lot of times of discrepancy in how well they're performing in classes versus on tests.
And there's been a lot of research around, if you focus on that, it's just gonna organically improve your PSAT, SAT scores.
Yep.
So, and that's what frankly really matters to colleges. You know, if we're looking at colleges, you know, you can have a 4.0, but if your PSAT, SAT score are not in alignment with that 4.0, you're still not gonna get into that school. You know, and I'm learning about that a lot more because of my junior who is looking in colleges right now. So I keep telling him, like,
Or you hear,
Go to that-
you know, I had a 4.0 and I didn't get it.
and I didn't get in.
Yeah.
But
Well,
this
listen to those
person did,
grades.
for sure.
And we were sitting there with this representative from Western the other day, and he specifically said, what are the extracurricular activities that you're doing? You have the grades, but what else are you doing? That's gonna get you in. And that's when my wife nudged him and said, see, you're running cross country again next year. I mean, just all those things come into play, and just how we were supposed to play.
Actually, Greg was doing pre-med initially, and he did a medical shadowing program at St. John's, and he was talking to one of the residents at the time, and the resident says, I hope you're doing a lot of like after-school stuff, because like all I did was biology and chemistry all the way through, and I had straight A's, and I had the hardest time getting into medical school because I didn't do anything else.
Yeah.
And so he was giving him the big plug, and my son's like, well, yeah, I do it like this and this and this, and he goes, oh, you'll be fine, you'll you'll get it.
You love.
But it's sad how early you have to start that. Like, my son's going to Brownell next year, and I'm like, okay, you gotta start like getting into stuff because you need to get right up. It's sad what we're doing to our kids.
That is also true.
Yeah.
All right, the next thing are you good? Moving on, Lucy, we'll go to the next agenda item. I just wanted to kind of show you the narrowed focused activity, the results of all the work that we've done this year and the conversations. Thank you for the grading conversation too, because that might inform this next piece of the work. So there were 2 questions that we asked you. The one question is, please rank on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most, the following in relation to what we believe to be most important. 7 of you from the committee. I think that's what we had, 7 on the committee, is that correct? So,
Oh, gosh, I've got 1, Terry, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Mary Jane, 7. I think that's, and Jeannie, 8.
okay, so 1 person didn't take the survey. I did not take the survey either. So, so of this, the way this works is 1 is blue, 5 is the most important. So if you take a look at this, 1 person out of the 7 felt that reviewing gifted and talented, that's a 1. It's not very important.
So we all felt that International Baccalaureate was a 2 of importance?
Yeah, everybody felt that it's just a 2. Yep. So 1 person felt that gifted and talented was a 2. 4 people felt that it was a 4, and 1 person felt that it was a 5. So really, there were 5 out of the 7 that felt that's something that we should put some time into. I'm going to give you my opinion when I'm done too, because I do want to show what I think. Early childhood, it seems like all 7 of the people that took it feel that we really should be diving into that, which it's fine because that's consistent with what we were going to say. This was the year we were going to dive into doing another strategic review of our early childhood. Everyone felt it was a 2 of the 7, which I thought that was strange too. When I saw that, I had to look at.
Everybody said IB was,
A 2.
oh,
Yeah.
it was a 2.
It was a 2, so not overly important
Okay.
to look at. Where 5 is the most important.
Didn't we have discussions about that about 10, 12 years ago?
Mhm.
We did.
So
Yeah.
Big discussion.
So much discussion, yeah.
It's a lot of work and
Isn't it expensive as well?
it is.
Costly?
That's
It
what we're
is.
looking at,
It's,
real.
it may not be cost effective to start it, and then it's also facilities. You have to have the space and the facility to do so. Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into it. Not saying that it's not something we should consider someday, but that's where we're at right now. Grading consistency, you all felt something a little different. So one person said, no, we don't really need to look at it. One person gave it a 2. 2 people gave it a 3. One person gave it a 4, and 2 people gave it a 5. Through our conversation today, I almost feel that if we gave this question again, maybe that would change. It would shift more to maybe a 3, 4, 5, but who knows. Virtual school, 4 thought it was a 3, kind of right in the middle of importance. 2 thought it was a 4, and 1 is a 5. CTE, we've got 6 people that thought it was between a 4 and a 5, and 1 at a 3. Our PLC effectiveness, 2 people thought it wasn't really that important to review. 1 person gave it a 2, 3 people gave it a 3, and 1 person gave it a 4. And then middle school, high school study, we've got 2, 3, and a 4. You kind of see there. So, and I would say PLC effectiveness in middle school, high school study, and CTE, those are all things that are really ongoing too. I mean, if we see that there's something in CTE that we think that we could kind of build, we're gonna build it. Just like the early education. You know, we built the course. I don't know if it's gonna run next year, just because we need to have the students to run it, but we're advertising it, we're putting it out there, we're marketing, wanting to get as many kids, interested, because that might inform, our future, so the more kids that we can get involved in thinking that education is right space, hopefully they'll go to college and maybe come back and teach in our district. So that's something that's really important to me. The next question was, please rank on a scale of 1 to 5 the most following in relation to what potential has the most potential impact on our students. This was what we believe, your belief is most important. The next was, what do we believe would have the biggest impact on our kids? And I'm going to kind of put this kind of up here like this so you can kind of see like the comparison. The comparison is pretty similar when we go across across the board. So I'm not going to read every one to you, but you can kind of see where we're at on both of those areas. All of those areas here. The virtual school, the biggest impact, that was a little bit of a shift, as you can see, between up here and down here. Level 4 or 5 of you thought that was important. CTE, because that would have a bigger impact on our kids if we had more opportunities. I look at Dakota. Dakota's got tons of CTE opportunities. But they also have a population of students that supports it.
Yeah.
The more students you have, the better ability that you can have to. We tried to run an EMT course, and we did run it at one time. Now we're kind of outsourcing it a little bit. It's just hard to do when you don't have enough students.
Then COVID hit.
And then COVID hit too. So,
Yes.
so yeah, we want more opportunities for our kids for sure, and we have to think creatively how to do that. So
What's the potential for combining some of those CTE classes for the 2 high schools
So we're already trying to do that with the early college one, the one that we just passed. It's one of the classes that we're trying to combine. In some cases it works, in other cases it doesn't, and the reason is travel. Because you have smaller schools, sometimes kids are tracked into let's say need an AP Calc class. And that AP Calc is at this time, it can only be at this time, because maybe some of those kids are also in a band course it's just hard. It's a big, huge puzzle to figure it all out, and the travel component, it can be a challenge sometimes.
CTE would be interesting as well. It would probably be almost like was that work study class where you'd have to probably keep a couple hours, right, and build up to get to that point, especially if you're going to do like nursing assistant which is a great thing to do, but co-op is the word I was thinking of, right? You'd have to do something like that, which I don't know why we don't go visit Dakota And, because they run it, they
I-
run
I
an amazing
Visited
program.
Dakota.
Did you back in
I called Ed and said, hey, can I get a tour?
the? Oh.
Yeah.
They do it, they also do culinary, right? Because they have a whole
They do.
kitchen.
They
serve
have a
us.
restaurant, it's
Right, yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
The whole program. I started my teaching degree at a career tech school in Texas. And
Oh,
we had,
okay.
we had a whole campus and we had about 10 different programs. It was
And it
great.
was, I began teaching there, my first few years at Dakota when they first opened. And then the second year they started running these, including the kitchen. And it was just a restaurant where they, and it's still there.
I'm
It's still there. They build homes and,
I could be mistaken, but I believe Fraser has the most CTE most
Do they?
CTE offerings in Macomb
do
County.
they
I
really?
think they're at like 20.
Wow,
Yeah,
well, that's great.
Fraser has a lot.
Yeah.
And it's all
organized
different,
differently. So
I know. The CTE consultant is across the hall from me too,
It's a
so I get her all the time.
different environment, a different family base that all support, but it's,
Well, the CTE is, from what I've heard in Wayne County, there's lots of regulations and there's lots of steps to be able to bring a CTE course to fruition. I don't know much about Macomb. I live in Macomb, but I don't know much about the educational programming in Macomb and how they're able to, offer the CTE courses the way they do. I think we offer a nice amount of CTE offerings for having two separate high schools in the way that we do, and continuing to look at different ways to even encourage more CTE offerings. We just keep looking at how to do it, but we also need to have the students to be able to fill those.
right.
And I think Lisa said something earlier, we're traditional college bound. So when you think of CTE, those are traditionally the students who aren't going to college or who are going to alternative paths. So it's a little bit harder for us when we have our focus so much on colleges to expand that as well.
That's true.
Hard to do everything well.
It's hard to
But
do.
it's an important niche that really
It
we need
is.
to have that.
Yeah.
And and Warren is really, I think, does a great job of their, because they have what they call consortium. And so you have kids from 3, there may be more than 3, but I know the Warren Con, Warren Woods, and Van Dyke, they all cooperate. And then the kids would leave, and the bus would be there waiting for them to take them, and each school had their, so I think Warren, I can't remember, one of the ones had, the dental assistant program, and we had culinary, but amazing. We had the chef was just awesome, and we had this beautiful culinary facility at the school where I was, and we also had auto shop there. And so it was really, they did some really amazing things, and then we had kids coming from there, and our kids were going, and it was that's a kind of cooperative kind of thing. And Macomb ISD just does a great job of.
They do.
They really do a great job of encouraging all those sorts of things.
All right, so what I'm going to do, if you're okay with this, Lisa, too, is I'd like to take this information, as I said before, to board president and superintendent. And Dr. Tuttle said that she was sorry that she couldn't be here tonight. She's at the finance facilities committee meeting, so she couldn't be at both places. What I'd like to do is take all of this information back to them. There's 4 specific areas that I think we should probably look at. I do think we should at least investigate virtual schools and see if that's an option for our school district or something that is going to, bring in revenue, but also give kids a different opportunity. I think early childhood is an area that we probably should take a look at. I think gifted and talented, I have some major concerns of our gifted and talented program right now, based off of how our gifted and talented program was before reconfiguration. In the past, we had 2 buildings that had it, we had 9 schools at the time, and they were there for 4 years. So it was pulling kids from all over the district. Right now, we have it in 4 buildings out of 7, which is great. We have it in 4 spaces, but it's only pulling the kids in those buildings. And it's creating a tracking system, and it's becoming even more challenging at some of our schools because we don't have the population to be able to have that program in that school. So we're getting into a space where we're still running it, but it's lower class sizes than it probably should be. So we have to make some decisions. And then we have a school like Kirby that is not sending any students to the magnet. I think that we've got one student from Kirby that is going to our magnet program out of the entire district, and they have plenty of kids that are working at a 95th percentile or above, within their end of grade scores. So I really want to dive into that. And then lastly, grading consistency. Yeah, I think our conversation around just 2 areas of the policy was kind of robust, and we've had some conversations about it, and maybe that's something that we should dive into. Here's the one concern that I have is that's 4 major ancillary committees, and I don't know if I could do all 4. So we'll have to talk about what is most important, and how we can maybe establish some timelines to really dive into those 4 areas. That's my thoughts right now.
And just to kind of throw out, so the virtual school, what do you think as far as, because we know that, everything comes down to dollars, right, in the end. How, what do you think cost-wise, out of all the proposals that we've discussed, what is the most, and outside of the grading, but, any kind of we're talking CTE, we're talking gifted, we're talking early childhood, we're talking, what was the one I was just gonna say?
Early childhood.
Early childhood, what was that? Did I miss one?
Virtual.
Virtual, thank you, virtual. Out of those, is any one of those that you would look at as being more cost neutral right out the gate?
Cost neutral, it could even be revenue gaining, could be the virtual school, because could we bring more students back to our school district? But I'd have to really dive in and get a committee together and really research that approach, and would that be a revenue building, revenue stream for our school district? So that, we'd have to look into it. I don't have an answer for that. If gifted and talented continues the way it is right now, obviously that's cost neutral because we're not doing anything differently. It could be a cost savings if we condensed the program. It would cost the district more money if we chose to expand it to the middle school potentially. But could we do something differently? Could we take, 4 of the teachers that we currently have in the program and, have the kids kind of go back into their regular classrooms with everyone else integrated to, in the schools, but then do some sort of an outreach program at all 7 of our schools, rather than doing something at 4 of the 7 of the schools that really is not necessarily probably providing us the best approach. You look at their test scores, students that have not gone into the magnet program are scoring just as well as those that have gone into the magnet program. I pulled that data just recently, and I've been tracking that data over the last 8 years that I've been in, 9 years that I've been in this role, and the difference in test scores are negligible if they're in the program or not. The experiences might be different, I think just a lot of the things that are going on. I had a parent contact me the other day. She's like, I went through that presentation and they gave a lot of great teaching methods that they're using, but I've seen those teaching methods all the way through with my kids. That's good teaching.
Yeah, we've got great teachers everywhere.
Right. So, and I think, with Magnet, when it was first brought to our school district, was also during the 90s when there was whole language and everyone was getting taught the same thing in the classroom, at the elementary school. So, and I think Magnet gave it a different option, for kids that were, in a gifted range. How do we still make sure we're meeting the needs of all of our gifted students is something that I would like to research, and what is the best approach for our school district. I would like to definitely dive into that for sure. But cost neutral, I don't know, it would depend, I think early childhood could be cost neutral, because it would just be revisiting what we currently do, and do we want to expand it, or do we want to keep it the way it is right now? We still have to take a look at GSRP, if that's gonna be something through legislation is going to affect our entire district. What's that going to look like? Are we gonna still be partnering with, outside organizations such as Wayne Metro, who we partner with GSRP? I know a lot of school districts partner with an outside agency that runs their GSRP program, but is legislation gonna change that and have early education for all students, 4 years old? Is that gonna be embedded into our buildings? So I think now is a great time to start reviewing what we currently do, and if legislation goes through, what that's gonna look like for our school district. So could that be cost neutral? I'm not really too sure. That may be something that is geared from legislation, diving into, what that looks like, and, how do we get FTE for those 4-year-olds then for our school district? Is that gonna happen or not? So I think there's a lot of unanswered questions that diving into a review next year might make sense.
I mean, I'd love to see data on early childhood and some comparisons to like local, because Lance Cruz has one, and Troy, of course, has one that's really well thought of. So I'd love to see some data on the utilization of that program, and how those kids, if we can get any kind of data and kind of cost comparisons and what they offer, I think would be helpful for us to kind of structure that. And getting back to the virtual school too, one of my thoughts is if we were to implement a virtual school, could that possibly help maybe in this era of declining enrollment? And we know that, we have budget issues, and could that help preserve some teacher FTE if we were to implement a virtual program? Could that actually save some teacher jobs and maybe increase some teacher jobs?
It's all stuff that we would have to take a look at. Most of the programs that are out there, a lot of the virtual schools that are out there are
Separate.
It's separate from than the teacher group. So
Right.
Michigan Virtual is a company that usually focus on that. You might have a couple teachers that are managing and a coordinator of that for your district, and then you have to have mentor teachers that are supporting the students. So it may increase the amount of mentor teachers you have, with that program, but it just depends on the approach that we would take a look at. I know districts that have tried to run a virtual school themselves have moved away from that because it was not cost effective. Most schools that are having it be cost effective are those that are using an outside organization to run their virtual school, like Michigan Virtual or Edgenuity, or help me out, do you know a couple others? Those are the two
big
main
ones.
Yeah, those are the two big ones. All right, I know we're a half hour over. I apologize. So new business, Lisa, do you wanna, I don't know, future meetings, that'll be probably next year when that's phase.
First of all, I know everyone's gonna be gone during July, and June's gonna be pretty insane for everybody, so, I would personally like to see us reconvene in August so we can get our legs on whatever we're doing before the year starts. How would everybody feel about an August?
This sounds good to me.
Yeah, I would definitely talk to Dr. Tuttle, because she had mentioned moving to a committee of the whole structure when she first started her superintendency, so I don't know if she would want that.
Well, we'll discuss she's obviously gonna be part of the discussion on how this is structured. I think maybe it might be good to tentatively put something down, and whether we change to a community, a committee of the whole is a different conversation.
I talk with Dr. Tuttle and bring some of this information, and then you and I connect, because I don't know if I can give any dates right now that
The calendar I know is
Yeah.
in flux for a number of
It is.
reasons, so.
And we're working on a couple different activities right now for our kickoff. So I want to make sure that we have that in line, and I don't want to schedule something and then have to cancel it.
Can you
Right.
confirm or deny, are you starting before or after Labor Day?
I can't confirm.
guys are killing me here.
Well, we need
My plan.
We need a waiver to start before Labor
I know.
Day, and we have not applied for that waiver,
Good
so
to know.
I would, that, we haven't settled the teacher contract, but that's where I would try that.
Okay.
Yeah, if I had my instincts, I would say we're probably gonna be after Labor Day. That would be my guess, but it's just a guess. I'm
That's
not.
fine.
I'm gonna continue to just sit here
Just sit.
and,
Your silence says enough.
and we can move to the next area.
Parents got a plan.
Yes. So, Lisa, do you want a public comment then?
So public comments?
No, but thank you for doing this. Appreciate it. This is interesting.
And, so committee member comments, starting with,
Well,
Do you have anything
I don't
further
have
that you wanna-
any further to share. I feel
Like,
that I
I-
talked the most at this meeting, so when we get to committee membership comments, I'll allow all of you to comment.
I don't have anything further, thanks everybody for their input.
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, I'm eager to talk more about grading consistency.
I thought we had great dialogue tonight.
I thought it was a great conversation, and it's always great to have a bunch of educators around the table too that have, been in the trenches, and I appreciate all of you, and it was a great conversation, and we've got lots that we're doing well, and lots, and this is like all about what this is. It's just, are we doing things, and what can we do to make everything as strong and, as good as we possibly can. So I love it, and I hope that we will reconvene in August is my hope, and thank you for your time tonight and staying over, everybody.